The number one question we get asked at ON2IT, how do I implement Zero Trust? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the Security Operations Center at ON2IT headquarters in the Netherlands, we bring you Threat Talks. And the subject of today, this is how you define a protect surface. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me introduce our guest of today, the expert on Zero Trust implementations. His name is Maas. He's the field CTO of ON2IT, and his job is to secure our customers' environments. And Zero Trust is the thing we do, the thing we believe in, and what we implement everywhere we go. And this is a series actually of multiple deep dives that we're going to do about this subject. And as we all know, most people know, is that Zero Trust actually consists of 5 steps. We're now in 2025. It's quite established that it's the case, whether it's the Cloud Security Alliance, whether it's the NIST, whether it's John Kindervaag, of course, who came up with Zero Trust in the first place. Let's follow those 5 steps. So let's start at the first one, step number 1, and that is define the protect surface. Rob, how do I define a protect surface?
Maybe one step back. What is a protect surface?
Yeah, good point.
That's a good point to start, I think. The whole idea about Zero Trust is that we flip our perspective on how we look at security. So what we used to do is look at the internet. That's what we call the attack surface. But the whole idea about Zero Trust is we are going to look at what we actually want to protect. And that's what we call a protect surface. So that's where the name comes from.
So it's the opposite of the attack surface.
Yeah, and also the opposite on how we should look at security. So we're not going to look at the attackers, but we're really going to look at what do we want to protect.
And are we really not going to look at attackers in all the 5 steps?
Not completely, but for now, let's keep it black and white to keep it simple. Okay. We're going to look at.
I'll ask you this question in step 3 then later. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So now we know what a protect surface is. It's something we want to protect. We need to know what do we want to protect then, and that's also maybe the most difficult part of whole Zero Trust is what do I have in my organization? What needs protection? How do I prioritize this? So that's all about step 1.
Are you talking about technical systems? Are you talking about ideas in the company, files, applications?
That's also a good question. So the whole idea about Zero Trust, or maybe even cybersecurity in general, is that we want to keep a business up and running smoothly. So that means that we need to have security in place to make that happen. And that's also where Zero Trust says, okay, but you should look at the business processes and the business domains that needs protection. So Zero Trust is often started by operational people. Don't step into the pitfall of defining all technical systems. We should really try to zoom out a bit. What's important to the business, and define that as a protect surface.
Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't be a nerd that defines protect surfaces then.
No, it should be involved, but you should have a category of different people, especially business owners of the different processes involved. The CISO, of course, operational people, and then have a good debate on what are our important assets. Because if we only leave it up to the business owners, then you might miss, for example, an Active Directory as a protect surface. Well, it really contains valuable data to the company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, gotcha. Step 1, define the protect surface. Is this really where Zero Trust starts, or is there like a prelude to this?
Well, there is a kind of a prelude because, of course, you need to have all these people on board.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, just as an operational team, we are going to define protect surface, we're going to implement Zero Trust, and you say, hey, a business owner, can you join us for this meeting? He will say, what? So you need
to have some readiness.
Yeah, and also for the later steps where you might have you need to have some investments in time and maybe even in new products. You should also have some buy-in from upper management to approve the budgets. So that's for the later stage. So you already should have a kind of a introduction into the company. Hey, we're going to do Zero Trust before starting off with step 1.
Okay. So how do I decide then what is a protect surface and what is not?
Yeah. So it's if you just zoom out and take a look at the company, then it's maybe hard. Yeah, you of course can find out a few important protect surfaces, but that also differs per person. We have a few things that can help with us. We have the abbreviation DAAS, which stands for Data, Application, Assets, and Services.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different categories. You can look at a company to see what needs protection. For data, maybe you have some customer records somewhere stored that needs protection, or maybe you have some intellectual property, maybe you have finance.
Sounds like a little bit like my data crown jewels in my organization.
Yeah, correct.
High critical assets or whatever you call it.
Yeah, and then what most companies will go with is applications, because their applications are often quite closely to the business process. So what we see, you can use DAAS as a way to look at your company, but maybe you already have a list of applications, for example. That might be a really good starting point to point out, hey, these applications are really important for our business.
Do you have a few examples? Say I'm a retailer.
Yeah, your point of sale system, if you're a retailer, is probably one of the important one. If you're an online retailer, you probably also have a kind of a stock system that keeps track of all the stock. And because you want to tell the customer, it will be delivered to you by tomorrow if you order within X amount of hours.
Okay.
Those are very critical, because if those systems go down, then probably your business will immediately suffer an impact from it. So those are really important protect services, and you should probably start with them. If you really don't have anything, you can always start with, hey, what kind of IP addresses have I in use? And which servers are that? What application hosts them? And then you will also come
so you
to
go
a complete list, but you
bottom
go
up.
Bottom up. But preferably you try to go top down. And I think most organizations nowadays have applications list at least. But some organizations also do enterprise architecture. And then they have whole maps of the business processes coming down to all the business.
And to what detail do you need to define such a protect service? You're saying you're talking about business value and types of data, application names. Does it also have to be IP addresses, object storage, bucket names, URLs, whatever that stuff? That's what we're talking about?
Yeah, so you should start really from the top here. So start with, hey, we're going to create a protect service around, for example, the point of sale system. Write down who's responsible for that for this point of sale system, for this protect service. What kind of data is in there? It's all what we used to call metadata. It defines what a protect server is and how important it is, what it holds. But in the end, you need to map that to systems and things that are involved that need protection. And therefore, you also need to go back to what IP addresses, what servers, what cloud resources are this. And you should also
defining it for the sake of defining it, but to actually do something with it. And then we need technical detail.
But we have a few steps in that as well. So we're in step 1. But you can start with defining just the things that you really want to protect. Just start by writing, we have a point of sale system. Oh yeah, that's communicating with our stock service. Okay, we add stock service as well. Oh, we also have a customer relationship management that's involved with that. Just write them down, so you get already a list, and then you can once you have 10 or 15 of those written down, you can say, okay, we're now focusing on what we now think is the most important one. Maybe that's the point of sale system, and we're going to fill it in further and make it more complete.
Yeah. You mentioned 4 letters, right? Your data we did. We talked about applications. The third one is assets. What do you mean by that?
Can be a very important mainframe, for example.
Yeah. So the actual equipment that has an IP or so. Printers, maybe? OT?
Yeah, OT I think is maybe a better one. Production lines.
Okay. And then the S,
services. Yeah.
A nice generic term.
Yeah. So DNS could be a service that you host. At least every company hosts it. But it's really important, because if I can get to your DNS, I can do all kinds of nasty things. And if it goes down, that's always DNS is a common joke within IT. It's really crucial for your whole infrastructure. And then, of course, you can always have a debate, is DNS an application or is it a service? But the whole idea about DAAS is that you just take a step back and try to look at it from a different angle at your company. Yeah,
it's the letters are the inspiration of ways to look at your environment. Then the service. Of course, DNS, AD, the stuff that the business typically doesn't look at. But IT really knows. I mean, if this goes, it's a bit of the dependency chain.
Correct. Yeah, but even IT doesn't know everything in the business. They know often a lot. So you also should have this challenge with people outside of IT. Yeah.
Can you give a few examples of protect service in general? You mentioned point of sales, then Active Directory.
Active Directory is a good one. Customer relationship management, enterprise resource planning, DNS we mentioned.
You're not saying
DMZ.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say something else. Do that one.
So the whole idea about protect services is to really look at what's important to our company. So DMZ is important from a protection standpoint, or used to be important. But maybe it's a good point to point out. So we're not trying to redefine DMZ. We really have a different way to look at how we are going to organize our infrastructure by looking at the protect service and protect the protect service. That's also why it's called protect service. And then the old way of thinking, as I often call it, is a DMZ, where we put everything together, and then if one system fails or is being compromised, then the attacker can still go laterally in the DMZ. But even worse, what we try to do then is that, okay, but the database is really important. We put that in the LAN, and then from the DMZ, we make a hole in the firewall from that web server to the LAN. That means that if an attacker comes to that web server, he also gets to the data. So we are only maybe protecting the server a bit, but not the data that we care about.
Yeah. So what you're saying is what Zero Trust say, we need to slice our IT environment in, let's say, horizontally. But DMZ is like slicing it vertically across all the protect services, and that's not not the kind of cutting through our environment that we're looking for.
Yeah, we really. Of course, we have existing environments. We cannot turn it around all at once, but we can start with creating smaller protect services. And this, you can, if you really are in the way of thinking of a DMZ, then just see every protect service as a DMZ, because that's a kind of a network segment.
But then a DMZ that contains just one web server, one application server, one database, all together as one.
Yeah, so really one business unit, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. You said relevance. You mentioned that just before.
So you can imagine if you're going to do this exercise, you will get a lot of protect services. Maybe also a tip a bit, don't try to do them all at once. If you have 10 or 15, then focus on the first 5 and to work them out more correctly. And then you can also put what we use, the relevance score. How important is this protect service for you? You can imagine that a point of sale system maybe gets 100 points out of 100. And that your stock is maybe slightly important, so maybe 90 or so is still important. But if the point of sale systems goes down, we'll immediately lose customers. If the stock goes down, then maybe I get a few unsatisfied customers. But then
the relevance to the business that you need to rank them at.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
What do you say to customers that, hey, they're all important, so it's all 100?
That's exactly the discussion we need to have, because that's not the case.
Okay.
It's never the case, but you should have a discussion with the stakeholders, with the business owners, on what's really important, what's the impact if things break or gets attacked.
Yes, everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you decide on this then? What is 100? You said the business. Aren't there underlying mechanisms already?
Yeah, you have mechanisms. So you can look at the data that's involved. That's often a good way of looking at it. You can look at compliancy. Maybe you just have compliance.
You mean the type of data, like it's personal data?
Yeah, correct. Financial data, etc. Then you have the compliancy. Maybe this protect service is not that important for you, but maybe for compliancy reasons it is. So that also will bring it up higher. And you can also use the CIA triad, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and put a score to those 3 elements. And then you can calculate.
Map those to relevance.
If you say I use a scoring from 1 to 5, for example, for the C, I, and A, and you give them all a score, and you divide them by the maximum, you have your relevance.
Okay. What can go wrong here? What are common mistakes, pitfalls that people get into?
Yeah, starting too broad. So try to map everything all at once. Which unless you're a really small company, you're definitely going to fail. So just start with your important.
Why would you fail if you do everything? I mean, what you're saying is your ambition should not be, hey, we have all our IPs, we have a CMDB, we have everything that's in our environment, and we're gonna segment them all out. You're saying you should not do that. It sounds like the best thing to do, because it's...
Now, first of all, if you already have, if you are absolutely sure that it's 100% complete, it already takes a lot of time, because you need to have the owners. Maybe you have them already. You need to decide what's in it, what's actually doing. But you will also see that during this exercise, you will see, okay, but maybe it's wise to put these 2 systems together. So if you talk about Active Directory, maybe you also have a Radius server, which is also just used for internal logon to a certain system, because they don't support LDAP, for example. So maybe it's wise to put them together, because in the end, they have the same kind of data. So it's the same business domain. And if you try to do it all at once, then you will see that once you're halfway...
The iterative process makes much better grouping possible.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Just grow into it, that I would say. Yeah.
So you start with a couple, 5 for example. That's what we often do.
Yeah,
we
have normally go
fast tracks and stuff where we go into a customer and start with before the step 1, and then help, and then we typically make sure that we put 5 in. How do you select those 5?
Mainly, so you have a few options here. You can focus on the most important ones. which makes sense. But in the end, we're now talking about step 1. But in the end, you also need to implement the security measures around this protect service, step 3, that is. So what would be good as a learning exercise is also choose 1 or 2 that are not that relevant for the business. So if things go wrong during the implementation and causes downtime, the impact is not that high.
You want to practice in peace.
Yeah, exactly. Just so you can practice a bit, but then after that, it is wise to go to your what we call crown jewels, or your most important assets, your high valuable assets, because once you really should consider that if you implement this one really high valuable asset, you make a major step in your cybersecurity posture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
But what I think I also here say is that we're not going to do step 1 for everything and then step 2 for everything. No, we're going to select those 5 or maybe even 1 and go through all the 5 steps.
Correct.
And then iteratively do that. And it of course, you will never get to step 5 if you try to do everything.
Exactly. And then also make sure that this whole process should be embedded in your business. So it should become a second nature to your business. Okay, we have a new project. What kind of protect service is it? And then go through all these steps.
Yeah. One of the principles of Zero Trust is design from the inside out thinking. Is that applicable to defining protect service as well?
Yeah. So what you really should do is think about what I'm going to protect. Really focus on what you are protecting. And then it's in the later steps, you use that same mechanism to look at, but what do I then, should I allow? What should my policy look like? Who's going to talk to me as a protect service? And that's, it sounds really simple, but a lot of security people are still focused on, hey, but the attacker is on the outside, it's on the internet, for example, or comes from the clients. And we're really focusing on how do I make that wall thicker instead of how do I make more better policies for the things that I really want to protect.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. Maybe we have some practical takeaways for our viewers. I think the first one we already got. Let's start small, maximum of 5. Would that be fair to say? Don't do more.
Yeah, you can write down a few, but then once you get to work them out, start with 5. That's a nice number to start with. And then you also have kind of an end goal. Oh, we have done this 5, and it doesn't get an endless process.
Okay. What else?
Really look at a structured way of doing this, especially since you should do this with a group of with different people, different stakeholders within the organizations, and really try to do it like zoom out a bit, especially if you're from an operational department, zoom out a bit on what's important for the business and have good discussions about that. So DAAS is a really good way of looking at your business, zooming out a bit. We're not trying in Zero Trust, what's often is a misconception, we're not trying to protect every single server or even every single container. We try to zoom out a bit. Hey, this is the protect service that we want to protect. And then
micro-segmentation in the sense of every server has to have a firewall that's impossible to do. Or at least it's very hard to do.
It's really hard.
Let's not put our
hard to
effort
maintain.
there.
And with automation, so we get maybe a bit closer when we talk about automation. But in most companies, we also have traditional IT, or let's VMs, or even still mainframes and physical servers. So that's almost impossible. Yeah.
Okay, so and by structure, what's the benefit of structure then? Since it's a multidisciplinary team that does this, there needs to be some kind of structure, some kind of getting used to a process, so you can iteratively do the same. You get good at it.
Yeah, that's exactly the idea.
Okay.
And the last one here is don't do this as a one-off. You should really have a roadmap. So we're focusing now on step 1. You're going to work on 5 protect services, get them into more detail. But then you should go also with this 5 protect services to step 2, 3, etc. So those are for a different deep dive. But that should really be your roadmap. So we start with 5, and then we say, okay, after the 2 months, we want these 5 to be completely implemented, all 5 steps completed, and then we go to the next 5. And you get also better and quicker at it, and then you will see that your Zero Trust will just grow and grow, and eventually you will come to a point that you say, okay, but these old legacy systems that we don't do, once there's a new project or a refreshment, then we will do them, but there's no need to do them now.
Yeah, the effect of this is that your money that you have to spend for security is applied to those, to there where it actually matters.
Yeah, and it's also really tied to your business, because we're now talking about business domains that we're protecting, and not so much as a single server. So what we used to do is, okay, but this firewall is up for renewal. We bring in a new firewall, and then we're happy for the next couple of 4 years or so. But we're not
control
really
renewal based where the investments go.
But it's not improving your security. It just costs you money. Well, if you even with your existing firewall and existing tools, because there's also endpoint, etc., go this way, you're really improving security on what needs protection in the business.
Yeah, it's a common challenge for IT environments and CISOs to figure out where to put the budget, right? What's the most effective dollar to spend?
Yeah.
And what you're laying out here is a way to put that in those places that aligns to the business's needs and protect the most important stuff first. That's what sounds very logical, but this is actually a way that works.
But the challenge here, I think, and that's coming back to your first remark, is you really should have your business aligned, because if you only do this from the upper level or the operational level, is not going to work. You really should put effort in creating people, put them together, have this discussion. What is important? This is what we're going to do, and that takes time. And time is always scarce. So what you see a lot is, okay, we're just going to renew our firewall, or we're going to renew our endpoint protection, instead of looking at where should we really put our money and time.
Thank you for this over a decade of wisdom on Zero Trust, Rob. That concludes our episode of the deep dive of Threat Talks for Zero Trust Step 1. If you liked what you saw, please like this video, like this podcast. If you want to know more, reach out. We can help you with this. This is our bread and butter. And if you want to not miss any of these talks, click on the subscription button, because then next Tuesday, the next Threat Talk will be in your inbox. And if you have any feedback, email us at team@threat-talks.com. And from the Security Operations Center floor here at ON2IT, I thank you very much for listening in and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by ON2IT Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.